It is my honor, of course, to introduce to you Dr. Jean Houston. And in one way, I'm sure a number of you will be touched with what's new. And for a number of you, Jean doesn't need that kind of introduction because you have interacted with her through the years in one way or the other. Some of you have attended workshops and or seminars. Others of you have read books. Speaking of books, she's the author of over 30 books, but that's the top. If you go downstairs in her home, up in Ashland, Oregon, into the archives, you know those 30 books that are published and we have access to? There's at least 30 to 40 additional books down below waiting to be published and on the runway coming out. So 30 books on the top shelf, another 100 right below, and then another 150 underneath that. Speaking of numbers, we were talking today, and people, you'll see Jean, and many of you, like I, have been with her for many, many, many decades. And then you say to yourself, how in the world can this woman do as much as she does, travel as many places as she travels, and still stay as acute as she is? And I think biologically, she may be one age, and physiologically, she's yet another. So she may talk a little bit about that, talk about what it is in relation particularly to what Dr. Cambray said, to what Joe said, about how this work resonates on multiple levels for us. Health, ingenuity, intelligence, insight, curiosity. You know, we're inviting the others in to be part of our world. And in addition to her work worldwide, she is the chancellor at Meridian University and the chairperson of the board at the Palace in New York City. I'm going to try to go like this, so let's just make a footnote. Palace, New York City. Come the fall, you will get emails and you're going to get Instagram. For those of you on Instagram and through all the different social media channels, there will be a big event that originates from the Palace going worldwide. That event is being orchestrated by Jean and her colleagues and friends. I'm participating in that as well. So that'll be something to look forward to. Now, she has inspired many through the years. And I think, for me, one of the things I value so deeply is how she has inspired the origination, the genesis of this place, Pacifica Graduate Institute. Oh, there goes my voice, there goes the nostalgia, here come the tears. You know, when I think back to when we were just, there were a number of people that were so kind, supportive, whose vision contributed. A number of the people are in this room as we speak. Jean Houston certainly was one of those incredible people that not only inspired, supported, and kept reminding us that you can dream as big as you can dream, and then it's not even your dream from the beginning. Something else is working through you. Go with that, you know. So I want to say thank you for everything that you've offered to all of us. Now, Jean is going to, I know because I've been talking with her, she really went deep and wide in preparation of her work this evening. She has. And I am going to really cut down, as Joe did, our remarks here at the beginning in order to allow spacious time so that all of us can join her in the journey that we're about to take. But there is just one last thing I do want to say. And that is, when I think of Jean Houston, when I think of Pacifica, I also think of Joseph Campbell. Because in those early years, Joseph and Jean were they were collaborating a lot. They were friends, they were colleagues, they had appeared, they'd come to Pacifica a number of times, they co-presented with one another, they offered their own work here. But their story is interrelated, and it does affect what we're going to experience this evening. So I do want to honor both of them in that way. Each of them in their own way and continue, have invited each of us into one of life's truly sacred gateways. They've invited us into the place of journey, into the place of journey. So tonight I invite you to open your imagination to see, as Joe was underscoring for us, to see into the imaginal realms. I invite you really this evening to take a breath, to breathe deeply and listen from the inside out. Truly, to listen that way is to receive what I know Jean is going to offer to us. E. E. Cummings speaks lovingly. Now the ears of my ears are awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are open. Nice. Will you please welcome an international treasure and a distinguished professor at Pacifica, Dr. Jean Houston. Jean.
Thank you so much, my dear old friend, for your very, very generous remarks. But the way you carry on about me, it seems like I've been around so long. I've been around since God had baby teeth. You know? It's good to see you all. Thank you. By the way, are any of my relatives in this room? I have relatives who live here, and I keep trying to find them, and suddenly they pop up. They're my Sicilian relatives, not my Scotch relatives, so they're off having a good time. Anyway, I'm going to start with a story. I was present at the dying of Margaret Mead. Some of you know who Margaret Mead was, the great anthropologist. Well, she was about this tall. She once looked up at me and said, "I need another daughter, so that's probably you." That was my adoption, you know. And she actually lived with us the last 6 years of her life, off and on. But she was something else again. She was the woman from someplace else. The scope, the depth, the incredible complexity of her mind. You're talking about complexity theory. She practically invented it. But her death was equally interesting to her life. So she's lying there, dying in the hospital, and suddenly she wakes up and she looks in the corner and she says, "Get out of here, go, scram, go." I said, "Margaret, there's nobody there." "Oh, you can't see them, but they're there." "Well, who's there, Margaret?" "Dead people. My mother, my father, and Ruth Benedict, her great friend." And then she fell back and she said, "Listen, I'm lying here being an anthropologist on my own dying, and it's very strange. There's no hierarchy to it. There's no way that you can actually find any real structure to it. But I realize one thing. If we're going to grow and green our time, and I see terrible things coming, it's going to be a question of people getting together in teaching, learning communities, growing, deepening, together and within themselves, because their inner life will then reflect in the transformation of the outer world. And when the time comes, you do that, Jean. "Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am." Now, what was curious about that is not only did it inspire me for my life's work, this had been 1977, I believe, but it also provided both a form and a formula for new ways of being together and in community. Because I'm convinced that with community, growing community, a growth community, we can transform the world. I mean, let's just face it, where we are in this remarkable, awesome, and awful time and place. I mean, one other thing. I asked her, "Margaret, I know it's an embarrassing question, but what do you want on your gravestone?" And she popped up and she said, "She lived long enough to be of some use." And I thought, boy, that's me. That's just all that I want. Being of use. How many of you want to be of use, whether you like it or not? I mean, being of use, when you get into that kind of question, it opens up the nature and development of our call to service in ways that link inner and outer realities, universal plans, practical actions, and passionate commitment. What to do where to go, how to take initiative, and the key point, how to understand your role as a potential leader, game changer, social artist in this most compelling moment in human history. I realize other times that history thought they were it. They're wrong. This is it. Worldwide, societies are crying for assistance in the transformation of their citizens, organizations, institutions. The need is to achieve, and this is something that she was just right on top of, achieve a new humanity and a new way to nurture the human species while we work to heal our home, the planet Earth. And the need is to develop the possible human in the possible society, in the more possible world. That's where we are. How about that for an agenda? And by taking the journey, we enter into the art and science of transformational selfing, which leads to transformational leadership. A dimension of leadership that is one of the great mysteries of the human beingness as we live lives of alignment, refinement, contact with the deeper purposes and patterns of evolutionary possibilities. This is the art of world-making, spirit-catching, mind-growing, soul-quaking leadership. Now I'm going to say something very radical, and it brings up Joseph Campbell. I believe this is also profoundly woman's work in this time. Joe and I, for all our work we did together, we would have knockdown, drag-out fights over this. Because he insisted that there was only the hero's journey. There was not a heroine's journey. Wrong, say I, and we would rise up, and if we could have boxed, we would have, you know. And he said, well, look at my 240 different cultural instances. It was all hero's journey. The human with the women, they were back in the, you know, anyway. So, and then I remembered Margaret Mead. And Margaret Mead said, oh, Margaret Mead and I went to the great museum in New York, Natural History Museum, to see the Venus of Willendorf exhibition. And you know what she looked like, you know. And it said fertility goddess. And she got so angry. She said, that's not a fertility goddess. That's grandma, the most important member of the tribe. Well, why is that? Well, you know, the women would die and the men were all getting killed by the woolly mastodon. And she's the one who survived and who kept the wisdom of the tribe and of the people and of the climate. She kept the wisdom. Well, Margaret, are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Do you have any other proof? Oh, yes. You see this lady? Yeah. She looks just like me stepping out of the bathtub. So that was the proof. Anyway. So friends, you're living in a time in which time is warping, space is collapsing, the climate is racing apocalyptically across the planet, especially around here. And we live lives that are somewhere between 10 to 50 to 100 to even 1,000 times the amount of experience and complexity compared to that of our ancestors of 100, 200 years ago. We are being asked to become worthy of the challenges and opportunities that we face. We are asked to recreate ourselves so that we can respond with dedication, courage, heartfulness, and deep insight, and an intelligence to a world that accelerates beyond anything ever know, so that 1,000 years from now, in the third millennium, they'll look back at us with gratitude and words to the effect of, well done, you ancient ones. You gave us our hope, our lives, our history. Well done. But what we need for this to really happen, as I hope to show you, is the heroine's journey. Now, before I begin, please know, and I will also use myself as, and when I talk about the recreation of the self, I am the oldest person in this room, chronologically. I'm well up in my 80s. Does that shock you? I am biologically 43. And I'm going to show you how to do it. How about that for an extra added event? It can be done. And I'll show you how to do it. Because we just get stuck at thinking we have to age. I am not old. I mean, I lived the life of a 35-year-old hotshot, you know, but we almost have to, especially, and that doesn't mean growing older is wrong. It's just that, well, you know, all mammals except ourselves live 10 to 12 times the age of puberty. You're aware of that. Think of the age of your dogs and your cats. What does it mean with your wisdom, with the incredible depth and variety of intelligence that you have, and the real wisdom and knowledge, if you could live with a body-mind that stays in a state of what? Give me the words.
Vitality.
Vitality. What else?
Joy.
Joy. What else? Health, yes. What else? Animated. What else? Interested, curious, chronic curiosity. What else? What? Inspiration. What else? Presence, yes. All these good things. You're full of beans, and you just keep on keeping on, but in a new way. Now, part of, before I really get into the how-to of it, it isn't just about staying young. It's really about how do we change the world. Because you were born to do it. Don't doubt, you were born for these times. How many of you feel that? In spite of it all, you were born for these times. But something else has happened that impels us. It is the discovery of the nature of reality in a new way. The discovery of the quantum nature of our universe is so major an event that it can literally transform the course of human history. With its profound revelations and implications can't be overstated, and the great 800-pound gorilla in the room can no longer be avoided, and that is consciousness. Quantum theory demands a radical revisioning of the role of consciousness as the underlying organizing principle of the universe. And with this understanding, quantum physics, dear friends, is introducing us to ways of seeing which profoundly impact human thinking, feeling, sensing, knowing, being. And the deeper knowledge of this, the kind that is taken not only into the mind, but into the heart, into the viscera, into the spirit, the soul, changes us profoundly. It can radically affect us and move us into speciation, the next stage of our becoming. If you study fossil records, you see on a wall I've studied this a lot, but let's say an ancient old wall, not a human-made, but one that is composed of natural elements, and you see a fossil over hundreds of years. And it doesn't change very much, same old, and suddenly, whoo, it shifts. It's called a punctuated equilibrium. Now, I think we're in a state of punctuated equilibrium, that we have to speciate, we have to grow or die, evolve or perish. And so it's a part of emerging evolutionary development of humankind that brings us to our inherent possibilities, and it requires the rising tide of you and me, and especially of women the world over, or else it will not happen, and we will move back to living lives of serial monotony, of same old, which presently is destroying the planet, putting cultures into regression. Now, one of the things I want to show you, and I'm going to show you experientially, is how to tap into your optimal template. I'm an old Plato scholar, and one of the things that Plato spoke about was the eidos, the divine ideas, and that these ideas are loaded, coded instruments of unfolding, of becoming. Each one of you, I am convinced, has an optimal template. For example, I'll use myself again. My best year was my 14th year. I had a wonderful time in my 14th year. I directed the opera Martha. I won the New York City fencing championship. I had a fine time. I really had a great year, my 14th year. And what I do is I literally go back into my 14th year. When I start feeling, I'm 14. And it's true. I talk about an altered state. It's really a great state. I recommend it. Your favorite year. Anyway, and you become, and the brain remembers it, and you become suffused with that optimal time instead of doing the old stuff of active regression into the time of troubles, because this nasty reptilian amphibian complex back here is always trying to protect us, but it protects us backwards to itself. It does not protect us forward. So it really requires a different use of the brain, of which memory is important. But what were some of the years that were your best year? Just name a year. Not a year, but I mean your age. 12. What else? 32. 33. 16. I was 16 going on 17. Go on, name some others. What? 42. 21. What else? Give me some others. 9? Why not 9? Yes, certainly. Yeah. But just think about it. Think about assuming it and see what happens. I did this recently with a dear friend of mine who's 80, and she had just fallen and completely broken her shoulder, and she was in terrible pain, and she was getting ready to die. I said, this is awful. This is nonsensical. What was your best year? 30. I was a great hippie at 30. I went all over the world. I danced. I carried on. She also imbibed visionary vegetables. But she said, I had this great life. I said, all right. Now, I want you to remember it. Please remember, you are 30. Just remember, just take on, to be suffused with your 30th year. Be this, do it. And she did. And I was watching her on Zoom, and I just watched she's British, so she has lots of lines in her face, as many Brits do. And I watched I just watched the lines just disappear, and she's stayed 30 in her mind, and she's both healing rapidly. Well, I've been doing this about 20 times in the last 2 months with people, and it's really quite extraordinary what happens, because your brain-mind system does what? It remembers. And by remembering, you are literally remembering yourself. And that's why I tell my age. I remember the 1930s, for God's sakes. What's going on here? Remembering the fact that, as quantum physics says, time past, time present, and time future are simultaneous. And that's something else we do, because can you affect the past? Yes. And it's not necessarily psychotherapy. Ooh, what a bad thing to say here. But anyway, it's... No, and I'll show you some of these things. So, your optimal template, the quantum blueprint of one who makes the world work. I recall Gandhi's great words that as human beings, our greatness lies not so much in being able to remake the world as to being able to remake ourselves. Okay? Why is this important? Because you are a space-time agent placed in a biodegradable space-time suit that is programmed to operate at different levels of excellence and to make a difference in this particular space-time of Earth's history. Otherwise, why did you get born now? Okay? And this is why I talk about you're living into your higher purpose and destiny for this time, rather than the more ordinary ones, given the nature of the problems and challenges that we face in our time. Now, we know that historically, in evolution as well as in culture, dangers tend to push us to higher levels, what we might call, sadly, emergence through emergency. And now the set of global problems that humanity is facing presently may turn out to be as important to our continued evolution as the organ crisis was billions of years ago. Never in history of the human race, as far as we know, have the dangers been so extreme worldwide. Yet in their role as evolutionary catalysts, they may just be what is needed to put us up to a higher level, thus the need to hearken to calling. So are you going to say, now, Jean, are you actually saying that God created Donald Trump to impel our evolution? No, I'm not saying that. I'm thinking it, but I'm not saying it. The universe is inside of you. You don't just live in the universe lives in you. And it is thus your responsibility is to reconnect with this inner nature, this emergent evolutionary nature, this optimal template, this quantum blueprint that has been waiting for you to recognize it, for goodness sakes, and be filled by it. Now, in the heroine's journey, which follows many of the same stages as the hero's journey, but what you do with it is somewhat different. How does it begin? With a call. How many of you feel some call, whether you like it or not? You're called to. What are you called to? Tell me, what are you called to?
Let's say serve the greater purpose of love.
Okay, very nice. What are you called to?
Stay in touch.
Stay in touch. What are you called to?
Compassion.
Compassion. But just notice, now, in the woman's call, in the classical male journey, in the famous one, it often is to get the hell out of a terrible situation and get on the road to something better, and therein to discover great adventure, opportunity, romance. In the woman's journey, however, it is the lure of becoming, the call to discover your higher usefulness. It's as if the earth herself is calling you to evolve, to help in this time of breakdown and breakthrough. And most important of all, it is to activate a higher nature resident in yourself, which rises to fill you with needed capacities, new ways of being. So let us just have a little 2-minute, 5-minute maybe, experiment of the quantum blueprint, the optimal template. If you stand up, please. This is fun. It's going to be with music. How about that? All right. Now, would you rub your hands? Rub your hands. Get a lot of heat in there. Okay. And I'm talking to my nice gentleman. All right. I want you to put your hands in front of you, and if you want to, close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that standing opposite you is your quantum blueprint, your optimal template of who and what you are. And it is looking for you, it is waiting for you to feel it. Feel it now, feel it now. Feel this optimal pattern of yourself. Come closer, you say. Please come closer. And for each of you, the sense of it will be unique. You may feel it as light, as joy, as something that is filled with the codes of your higher nature. It has been waiting for you to sense and recognize it as your higher destiny in all these years, in your local life, in this, your present space-time suit. And for millennia, perhaps before that, in fact, since the first cosmic seed began to bloom. And now the moment has come as you move toward this greater optimal template, this higher you, in body, in mind, in spirit. And as it moves to you, you can even extend your hands and feel yourself connecting with its energy, its wondrous plans for you, its wonderful healing, its deep healing experience. As you move into it, you feel your larger life growing. You connect now with the energy and the plan for your larger life. Regardless of where you are in your life, the larger life is there looking for you. And as the optimal template moves in you, you know that you are becoming a superb catalyst, a carrier of new genesis. The world is getting ready to move. Your mind is growing so you can think in many ways and words and images, thought waves that sometimes seem to border on genius, that which had been lost in your childhood or adolescence, as well as those remarkable skills and qualities that are latent. They are rising in you again, and you now come again to become active as an agent in this transitional time and space. Know and feel that you are loved, You are nurtured. You are empowered. You are called forth to your highest destiny for this life and this time, where the paradigm of healing, the paradigm of higher order of being, enters into your daily experience for yourself and for others. Receive now. Oh, receive. And in this state, you can give up any kind of resistance or refusal of the call. You can give up your resistance and inertia and agree to this call. You go beyond the masochism of being victim, the decades of toxic thoughts dropping away. You begin to release the old brain cataracts. You wake up from the bad dream. Instead, you make high agreements. You can say or write something like, I agree to relinquish those limiting patterns of body, sensory, motor patterns, any bad emotion, old intelligence, lesser intelligence, and understanding. I agree to discovering ways of transcending and transforming my local life so that extraordinary life can arise. I agree to explore my passion for the possible, my passion in my own development while discovering what that possible is. I agree to reaching out toward my quantum destiny while knowing that it and my optimal template is reaching out to me, is filling me, is now being charged and recharged to continue in me. So you see, my friends, you have done something to reignite your pilot light. You have announced to the universe that you are ready to change your belief structure. As you change your belief structure, everything else changes. You are responding. You are responding to the evolutionary principle that is beating upon your brain pad, announcing a potential new development in your development. You feel it now charging you, nurturing you, nourishing you, giving you access again to the mysteries of the human condition as they are related to the divine mysteries that can transform your body, your mind, as they reveal the relationship of your local self to the whole, and thus empower you, the faithful recipient, to express yourself in richly new creative ways, to become a revelation to others, an intellectual and psychological beacon, an evocateur of new patterns, new relationships, new discoveries, bringing new mind and new matter to an old world, and serving as a catalyst of change, a pathfinder of deeper realities. You are ready. You are ready. You are ready. Receive. Receive. Oh, dear friends, receive. And stay with it. Thank you. Okay. So that's the feminine version of the call, and also not heeding the refusal of the call, which Batseba too. And then occurs the arrival of the allies. The arrival of the allies. And you may know it as the book that opens to a page with words that evoke you, like a revelation, the phone call that happens to give you information that helps you in unforeseen ways. Connections show up. Connections show up, and they show up often very physically. Ones that hadn't been seen before. People arrive. Those who will be of value to your life as it unfolds, maybe even companions and helpers on your journey. Why? Because you have become a generative field of frequency and of energy. And with all the new research in quantum physics, the bonded electrons, you are bonding fiercely, beautifully, extensively through space and time, past, present, and future, because quantum physics tells us that past, present, future are simultaneous. Things begin, and this is what they say, this comes out of Princeton, subtle things happen in the past that we're not seeing it before, that seem to activate things in the present and future. It's as if everything is gathering together to lead you into a higher order of being. And with the universe, the Buddhists call it interdependent co-arising. The universe is rising simultaneously with you, being coded by your thought, you, and recoding you to higher forms of being. Now, there's many things that you can do once this has. A regular spiritual practice seems to be essential. How many of you meditate? Pray? Dance with your dog? I mean, there's many forms that it takes. Restock your mind at night before you go to sleep, not with murder mysteries, but with evolutional, evocative thought. Great poetry. Mary Oliver is very good for all of this, you know. But restock your mind. You might even consider the ultimate ally, the universe itself. I've worked with Aboriginal people in Australia, and the elders sometimes just lie with their eyes open at night and let the universe, and of course, if any of you have seen this, the sky in Australia, whoo! These millions of stars and just falling into you, and you know you are the universe. Aldous Huxley, who was an old friend of mine, said, "Understanding is not inherited, nor can it be laboriously acquired. It is something which, when circumstances are favorable, comes to us of its own accord." So you see, friends, all of us are knowers all the time. It is only occasionally and in spite of ourselves that we directly understand the mystery of the given reality. We are not helpless. Knowledge can be invited. We can set the stage for revelation. Now, there are so many options to extending your awareness and the activation of the allies that come to you. I believe that thinking in different modes is very key here. How many of you think in words? How many of you think in images? Now, some of you will, of course, think across. How many of you think musically? How many of you think with your head brain? How many with your heart brain? How many with your gut brain? Powerful brain there. How many of you think as a healer? You really assume the persona of healer with everything that you do and everything that you see. How many of you think as a child? You take on the persona of child. How many of you think as a cook? As a dancer? As a dog lover? As a mountain climber? As a god or goddess? You think I'm joking? You will see what's coming. Because different persona within you often bring unusual and helpful insights to any situation. And this is also one of the ways that you fool the guardian of the gate, who in this journey you're about to meet. But you need a whole different way of problem solving and thinking that the guardian is simply too dumb or too lazy to catch on. And the point, dear friends, is that you are not a passive observer in the cosmos. The entire cosmos is expressing itself through you at this very moment. Can you get your feeling tones around that? If you can't, jump persona and find a persona within you that can accept it. Altered states of personaing, you know. You are the universe in making a choice, and that is why you have the capacity of seeing reality from so many more perspectives. You are thereby brilliant, whether you like it or not. So at this stage, the hero attempts to cross the threshold of adventure, to enter the realm of amplified power, just as you all are on the threshold of gaining the higher uses of your powers and the deeper sense of purpose that comes with living this quantum destiny. You have turned the page on your humanity. You are speciating. Now, the guardian of the threshold is given to schedules, fixed habits, and attitudes cast in concrete, thus is a worthy adversary. Sometimes it shows up as supervisors, bosses, or friends who are given to primitive reptilian behavior, generally being overprotective of the status quo or of the ordinary. At worst, the guardian devours us or turns us into wimpy versions of itself. You become an assistant dragon. At best, it hones our pluck and cunning and requires that we come to it with witty ways to get past its snatching arms. In the male journey, there's a great deal of fighting and contest with the guardian. In the female journey, however, you often discover that the threshold guardian is within oneself, is that part of ourselves that will not release our hold on ordinary consciousness enough to let us dissolve the ordinary in order to enter into the extraordinary. In fact, it activates a reflexive part of ourselves that makes excuses and inhibits our heroic nature. Oh, it's just too arduous. The price admission is too high. The bar to entry is insurmountable. I give up. Yet in this, I say again, the only real barrier is oneself and one's own fear of the unknown that comes with a genuinely responding to the call. The neurological component in the older brain parts of the brain are there to protect you so that you drive well and you cross the street and things like that. But then when it is then grants, accepts as it's what it does, everything else, it really stops you. What I do with that old brain is I give it a job. Because it wants to work, it needs a job. It's just like if I have a dog who is the kind of dog that shepherds. I have a big shepherd dog. And he says, I need a job. And he thus goes around shepherding everybody who comes in and putting him in places. But what I do with it is I say to I call it my dinosaur. Now, I really don't like to write. I've written a lot, but I hate writing. And I have to get to the computer and write. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And I have this dinosaur behind me that I've given the job. Push me to the computer. Push me. Make me sit there. Push me. And it says, okay. It's really kind of dumb. And he gets behind. So you give it a job. Give your old brain a job. And see what it does. It really wants, it's like a shepherd dog. It wants something to do. Okay? Now, I'm telling you these great truths, and you're giggling away with me, but that's okay. So, the best way is, of course, having a spiritual meta-technology to explore the brave new worlds of inner continents that you contain. I mean, working with individuals, I've been known to use trance, dreams, guided inner journeys, affirmations, scripture, and the rethinking of others' spiritual potent lives and literature. In other words, to open up the treasure house of one's being. And whatever one uses, friends, once your heart and mind are fired, once your heart and mind are fired, then all manner of change is possible because it sets up a new momentum. So it's critical to ask, what and where are my firing points? Is it intellectual ideas? For how many of you is it intellectual ideas as a firing point? Is it being in nature? Is it a state of loving? Is it a new grandchild? Oh, look at all the hands going up. Is it, I mean, the fact is, you find things that give joy. Who was it? Pablo Casals said, the reason I am so happy and I do my work is that every morning of my life, the first thing that I do is go to the piano and I play 2 Bach preludes. And that gives me so much joy that it stays with me throughout the whole day. What is it that really gives you joy that you can start your day with? Truly, it's so important. May I hear some of the things that you can start your day with? Gardening. Working on patience.
Irving Berlin.
Irving Berlin. I knew him. I knew everybody. That's the problem. I even met some people you don't want to know, but anyway. No, Irving Berlin, I knew him when he wasn't that old, he was in his 80s, but his wife was the head of the Girl Scouts of America, Ellen Berlin. And I was the leading Girl Scout of New York City. I led all the parades. And because I was I was the tallest and the strongest Girl Scout. So I carried the American flag. And that's how I've met the Berlins, anyway. So much in my biography I've never put in. But thank you for mentioning. But it works. What song do you like of his?
To be careful, it's my heart.
Yeah, isn't that lovely? What was his favorite, do you know?
What'll I do?
I'm trying to remember, he had a favorite. Starts with A.
Always?
Always.
Yeah.
That was his favorite song.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. Yeah. He wrote that for Ellen.
Yeah.
Ellen. Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah. So the thing is, what is it? If you start the day with something regular and beautiful and not with your cell phone, excuse me very much, but something that is really beautiful, the portals of new belief about the nature of reality are open, and you cannot recede into the back rooms of ordinary ways of being and thinking. So whatever it is, it requires the discipline of stepping forward and diving within, searching, asking, receiving, exploring, constantly reflecting upon the beingness that is being released as you. The doors of perception are being cleansed, and one sees reality for what it is, infinite. And your whole mind, body, brain system is being restructured because you are potentiated and coded with speciation and the next stages. But you have to help it along. And these are the ways of helping it, you see. And also stop the process out of laziness or old habits or procrastination. That's to deny your destiny and jump the track from one's evolutionary calling. So a certain rigor of purpose is necessary. Now, in many communities, you have sanghas, that is, community of friends or people who are growing together, like you probably have here, who serve to keep you faithful to the process. It doesn't necessarily have to be a religious process, the Sangha, but something where you are mutually, deeply deep-seeing and mutually empowering each other. How many of you have something like that? A Sangha community. Yeah. Because others will look out for you if you won't look out for yourself, you see. And then you come to the next part, which is the belly of the whale. You get past the threshold guardian of old ways of being, and you enter into a deeper journey, and guess what happens? The hero is swallowed. You know, Jonah and the whale. And this permits you to dissolve your identity in order to be rewoven into a stronger and brighter force. It is the womb of higher becoming. In the male version, it's a boring place, let me get out of here. In the woman's journey, it is the place of gestation. It's where you develop new strengths and capacities that will allow you to enter the next stage of entering the realm of amplified power, danger, opportunity. In this process, we die to our modernity and are reborn into our eternity. Now, you know the belly of the whale in many guises. It may come as a very strong need to get away. It may be like a depression or as melancholy. My form of it is melancholy, sadness for the earth. But these are both really ingressions, a call from the deeper dimensions of oneself to prepare, to recalibrate, to regenerate oneself so that you are worthy and able to traverse the realm of adventures and challenges. Now, one of the best ways to use this gestation is deep work with your senses. Sharpen your inner senses, what are called the proprioceptors, propriopreceptors, the antennae that form your inner sensing system, so you can unlock the potential magnificence of your five senses and more, and evolve their use and capacity. Why? Because this kind of inner work greatly reorients you in yourself, in the world, in space, and in time. I have had the good fortune to have studied, as students of mine, people who had high sensory knowing. Among my students, I once studied 55 of some of the most sustained creative people in North America. My students included Margaret Mead for 6 years, Joseph Campbell off and on for 20 years, Jonas Salk, Buckminster Fuller. You get the idea who they were. And I found that in each case, they were archaeologists of their own mind. They were spelunkers in the caves of their own creativity. They were fascinated by themselves. Especially Margaret, she utterly fascinated by herself. It was wonderful. By the way, I had deep troubles because I was close to Jo, and she was my mother, and they did not like each other at all. You couldn't put them in the same room. We won't go there, though. But the point is, what you do is its deeper forays into the senses give you a natural compendium of spiritual processes and ideas. And most important of all, especially for being here, is the imagination takes you to where? The imaginal realm. When you have active internal imagery, you almost go into a natural form of imagination, and with that into the imaginal world. I want to talk a little bit about this. When I was, you see, I'm somebody who met everybody, but I met Mr. Einstein when I was 8 years old. Why did that happen? I went to PS6 in Manhattan. PS6 was an enormously advanced school where we were taken to meet the great elders of the time. And one of them was Albert Einstein. And we walked into his place in Princeton, because it was his lab, as I recall. And he came in, short little guy, wild hair, as I remember, a blue sock and a red sock on. Seemed a little big. And he sat down. And one of our really smart aleck kids said, Mr. Einstein, how can we get to be as smart as you? And he said, read fairy tales. We did not like that answer at all. So another smart aleck kid, Mr. Einstein, how can we get to be smarter than you? Read more fairy tales. We didn't like that either. But the point of it was that he finally said it was the imagination. That his main quality, and he said this throughout his life, was imagination. He would become what he beheld or thought about. He would ride the light beam. He would ride the light beam. And out of that came a great deal of his creative ideas. He was a poor mathematician, by the way. He had to hire graduate students to do the mathematics. But he was an extraordinary Imagineer, you see. Imagination. And boy, did that stick with me. So one of the things I'm really suggesting, friends, here, is that the activation of the inner senses, and it really takes time and space to do it, because you are redistributing a lot of neuronal contacts, brings you to the imagination. Imagination inevitably takes you to the imaginal, the place of what? Give me 2 lines.
Dreams and reverie.
Dreams and reverie. What else?
Spontaneity.
Spontaneity.
And magic.
And magic. And what else?
Play. Play.
Play. High play. Creativity. You enter as a co-partner with God in the design of world making. You become a world maker. And you are activated, you are fired, and you have to do and be. You become the outpost of God, if you will, in the realm of space-time, in the realm of creation, you see. You know, well, I'll take this. And you also learn the arts of embodiment. Our bodies and our minds are coded with extraordinary array of possibilities and potentials. So after activating the sensory system, I show you ways of activating the psychological condition. Now, the psychological condition is that you are not an encapsulated bag of skin dragging around a dreary little ego. You are an organism environment. You are symbiotic with all of life. And you have many, many, many different persona in you. That ego structure is only a front to protect the rest of yous, as we used to say in Brooklyn. The rest of yous. I mean, if I look at myself, yes, I'm a teacher, I'm a dog person, I'm a traveler, God knows. I'm not a writer. I'm not a writer. How did I do all this nonsense? Because I happen to have one of my persona has no blocks whatsoever, and that is the cook. I am a very good cook. In my, would be this year, 55 years of marriage, only he died 10 and a half years ago, so 45 years. I cooked him 2 wonderful meals a day and often did not repeat a recipe. And the reason I'm such a good cook is because my mother, Maria Annunziata Serafina Graziella Fiorina Perpetuo Tedaro, married Jack Houston of Texas. They hated each other's food. He could not abide the look or smell of garlic. Mary, those are stink buds in the salad. No, it's just good garlic, Jack. All Italian meals had garlic in it. They're stink buds. It's what the old witch women down in Texas would wear around their neck to fight off the runny Jews, you know. So, but the thing is, in order to keep them together, I became the world's first, what was the word they call them now? But it was a world cook, you know. And I would make chicken fried polenta, trying to put their different, it didn't keep them together, but I really tried. But I am not stuck as a cook. I'm not stuck. So when I have to write, damn it, I just become a cook, and I think in different textures and swirling and a milieu and a mélange of different ideas, and the soupçon of this little eccentric spice and that one, and I then go with this sensibility and I sit down and write. You have so many persona in you, and you behave as if the local self is all there is. I hope you don't, but I'm just saying. Part of an advanced evolutionary psychology is to honor the multifaceted polyphrenia of your psyche. You're not schizophrenic, you're polyphrenic. That's useful. You have so many different persona. Now, it's interesting about schizophrenia, though, because years ago, my husband and I studied schizophrenia because we were called to a very unusual split personality, where in one personality, a person had really serious liver cancer, and the other personality, he did not have liver cancer. Everybody was so shocked, nobody wanted to talk or write about it. I've seen this in a number of cases. Different persona give you different capacities, if you bother to really have them. Now, it's very easy when you have a split personality. To really begin to evoke the different persona that can do different things is something else, and it requires active use of altered states of consciousness, serious altered states to be able to do that. I've never done it with anybody, but I know it's possible. So different persona. Another thing is to turn on and turn off your epigenes. Now, you know, epigenes are the triggers that evoke, turn on a gene or off, but they're very sensitive to your thoughts and feelings and responses to things, which then influenced their decision to turn a gene on or off. I decided to turn off aging. You see what you see. So in my body, it all went, you know, and turned all these things off and turned something else on, which makes me look like a perfect fool, but, you know, it's fun. How to affect the epigenes. How to work constructively with a switch to turn a gene on or off, and to know how not just to affect the epigenes, but how to work constructively with the switch. How do you do it? You focus and learn how to hold and sustain the image of the optimal template in yourself. And you then turn on the epigenetic genetics that advance what it is that you are trying to do, which might be a higher quality of life. All right, let me give you a very simple process. Begin to move different parts of your body, everybody. Just move. And I want you to put joy in each part, or a joyful memory. Okay, so I'm moving my hand now. With it, I am remembering one of the best meals that I ever made. Okay, my right foot. Oh, that's very nice. It's the joyous time when I met my beloved husband, and the moment he met me, he startled back in shock because he used to have a dream, a repeated dream when he was a little boy of going to a closet, pushing back the clothes and going down and down and around and around and meeting a fairy princess in the boat who took him on many adventures. And I looked exactly like her when I was, 23, 24. Well, that's not. And my left leg, what's there? Oh, that's when I finally finished writing a book I was stuck on. That was good. Anyway, you just put joyous memories into different parts of your body mind. Because in this kind of state, you actually actualize joy. Joy attracts higher orders of being. Joy attracts higher destiny. And you really begin to learn how to turn off the limiting and destructive genes, behaviors, and switch on positive, healthy, creative ones. Now I'm sounding like a preacher in a New Thought church, but the fact is this stuff works, you know. And then you come to divest yourself of limits and negative thoughts and actions by switching on the genetic constellation that affirms and supports your positive engagement with self and world. Oh, Walt Whitman, great American poet, philosopher. He wrote in a 19th century version like this. He said, in many ways, he was the first epigenetic poet. He said, "From this hour, I ordain myself loosed of limits and imaginary lines, going where I list, my own master, total and absolute, listening to others, considering well what they say, pausing, searching, receiving, contemplating gently, but with undeniable will, divesting myself of the holds that would hold me. I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness." So it begins, "From this hour I ordain myself loose of limits and imaginary lines." Can you do that? So here on the threshold, you are now, having crossed it, you're in the realm of amplified power, sometimes known as the supernatural allies, a vast ecology of helpers. And you learn the arts of really connecting with higher guidance, the larger support system in which you are nested. Now, in the feminine version, you really take this part very seriously. In the male version, you're going around looking for, as in the Marvel comics, you know, some special kind of device that you can throw out and save the universe. But in the female version, you are nested in a larger universe, able to travel between local and non-local realities. And you fine-tune your ability to work with the limitless, the Goddedness, the great cosmic oneness in interdependent co-arising with the universe. And you discover everything is connection, everything is hologrammatically connected, everything is patterned after the universe to which it's connected. You see. You take creativity, for example. The universe is an infinitely creative organism which imparts its creativity to us. And we in turn reflect this by delivering our creative nature and process to that which we want to create. This changes the nature of the universe, which sparks it to greater creativity. In fact, you discover that your brain and the cosmos are deeply related and are running as fractal forms of each other. I have many lectures on that, and this is not the place for it, but trust me, it's true. We are God stuff incarnate in a limited space-time body, but we are able to tap into the vastness of being. We are able to tap into the vastness of being and tap into what the Sufis call the treasury of unseen generosities. The treasury of unseen generosities. When you know yourself as the universe in innovative process, you gain a larger sense of your own unique role in this time. Of course, you are an evolutionary agent. Of course, you are an infinite consciousness, localized in a human brain, mind, being, spirit. So you should never, ever, ever underestimate your power. Ever. You can really tap into all manner of things, including time. Time is something that I'm going to be doing with Steve on Sunday, because, again, it was Einstein who said time, past, present, future are simultaneous in a way that's very hard for us to understand as we are conditioned to the arrow of time. But when you really enter into these other kinds of time, you become capable of all kinds of things. You can shift a memory in your past, not a major one, not a big trauma, but let's say a small memory, and you can shift it in such a way that lots of things shift up the timeline. An example, you're in the 3rd grade, and Mrs. Horseface Horror comes by, and it's the drawing class, and she says, "That is terrible, terrible. You have no talent, go read," or something. Anybody ever have that happen to you in art class? Okay. So you change it. And she comes by and you really live it. You go through the curtains of time. I mean, I physically do very physical things. And you come to that place and you watch it and then you change the story. And the story changes as, for example, this is a real thing that happened. She comes by and she says, "Oh, isn't that interesting? A house that looks like a fat person. So creative, my dear, so creative. Please keep on." Well, as it happened, this person the first time I did this, went and took art lessons, turned out to have a real talent, and about 2 years later, she had a gallery showing. But she just remembered, oh, I can't draw, oh, I can't, you know. So that would be an example of a kind of typical way of shifting something, you see. But you change the story and you keep at it until it becomes the remembered thing and the so-called existential event becomes a dim dream. Now, what is really interesting, and I haven't really gathered the evidence for it, but at least a dozen times when I have done these exercises with a lot of people, at least a dozen times to my memory, people who were around at the original incident remember now the remembered incident. I thought it was, no, it's not that. It's like when you know, and things shift. Are you editing the texts of God? Are you altering, as my New Age friends say, the Akashic records? Whatever is happening, something is shifting. Time, past, present, future are simultaneous. And then you learn, it's very easy to learn, how to dramatize, enact, create a desired intentional future that is so rich and you are so full of vitality about it that it energizes the frequency and an interdependent co-arising with the universe, the intended event happens. Now, I made a study also of people who are lucky. Just one kind of luckiness right after the other. And the 2 luckiest people that I ever knew were Margaret Mead and Deepak Chopra. Okay, Margaret Mead. I mean, luck would just follow her around. She'd think about something and it would happen. So we're walking arm in arm in Central Park and she is complaining. Boy, she knew how to complain. She was an artist of complaining. And I don't have this information, and I absolutely need it, and I need it right away because it's critical to my speech tomorrow in Washington as the president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I need it now, and it is just escaping me. And a woman comes up to us and says, "Dr. Mead, you don't remember me." "Oh, of course I remember you. You were in my class in 1947. Your name is Linda Nussdorf, and you never finished your paper." And she said, "Well, I didn't. I'm sorry, Dr. Mead, but I went on to graduate school and I did my master's on," and it's just what Margaret needed. Margaret got said, "You come home with me." You know, this happened all the time. And I said to her, "I've never seen anybody so lucky." She says, "Yes, I am blessed." "Well, why are you so blessed?" "Because I expect to be." But it also took another form, and sometimes it was very zany. As, for example, working with us was this beautiful, beautiful young man named Alex. He was 24 years old. And I found him sitting in a disconsolate type of, attitude. And I said, Alex, what's the matter? What's the matter? Oh, Jean, I'm so deeply in love. You are. Mm-hmm. Well, is she a little older? Mm-hmm. 5 years older? Mm-mm. 10 years older? Mm-mm. 20 years older? Mm-mm. Who is it, Alex? It's Margaret Mead. I'm madly in love with Margaret Mead. Beautiful Alex and Margaret, who was and had a very pleasant face. But anyway. So I'm so shocked. I go up to Margaret. I say, Margaret, you realize the beautiful young Alex is madly in love with you? And she said, of course he is. Everybody is. I said, why is that? And she says, I am bread to them. They are wine to me. Very interesting what happened, you know. And so, and then, you know, you look at my old friend Deepak, and I was on the phone with him the other day, and he was telling me, you know, it's so wonderful, Jean, everything I think about, immediately it happens. And I said, why? Because of my mother and the Hindu gods. He would say, the mother would say, Deepak, and the little boy, Deepak, you are Ganesh. Ah, Mama, I am Ganesh. I have a long nose. I'm going to hit you with it. You are Shiva. I am Shiva. I dance, you know. You are, and went to Lakshmi. Lakshmi, I am very rich. And it turned out to be, you know. So what was, but he really believes it. Belief structures reality in very big ways. And he really believes it. And he's in this continuous receptivity to all and everything. But his parents patterned him for that, as Margaret's parents also in a very different way patterned him to thought structuring reality, you see. And now you will say, how can we do it? I'm this many years old and, you know, I've been stuck. Well, shame on you. You know, this is the time realizing the incredible orchestral choice power that you have only on your own lives truly. And you say it's too late. No, you are young. I mean, if I'm 14 years old, you're younger than I am. And you have this capacity that then turns on the epigenes, turns them off, and also structures reality in a way that the universe gets used to. It might take a little while at first, but it gets used to your new structure. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's just the way, this is the way, when we look at quantum physics, the way reality works. What I do is I look at quantum physics and I say, well, get beyond the formulas and the mathematics and look at the implications and work with it. And that's what we're doing, you see. Of course you are an evolutionary agent. Of course you are an infinite consciousness located in a human brain, mind, being, spirit. You should never, ever, ever underestimate your power. Ever, ever do that. Now you then go on the road of adventures. Now in the female journey, you take the yellow brick road. Now this is the great female heroic journey. I wrote a book about it called The Wizard of Oz. In the male journey, it is often a journey of aloneness. In the female journey, you almost always go in a wonderful togetherness. You help each other. What does Dorothy do when she ends in Oz? She takes the poor scarecrow down from the fence. She puts the straw back in him. What does she do? She brings oil to the Tin Man, and she empowers the lion to his true power, not his false power. And that's what you find in a lot of the female heroic journeys. And this then leads you to training your creative imagination and calling forth latent powers, talents, activities, abilities in this road of adventure, sometimes called the road of trials. And here you have to be quite creative to meet the challenges that you face and the need for a high and original creativity, thinking way out of the box. You have to think of yourself as tellers of the new story. That's why all this imagination, all of this tapping into the alternative selves. I mean, we are so rich and we use like this kind of fraction of what we actually have inside of us. Tellers of the new story. We are living in the changing of the story in which the old maps do not fit the territories if they ever did. I mean, the only expected is the unexpected. Everything that was isn't anymore. Everything that isn't is coming to be. In this time of phenomenal change, the most radical deconstruction and reconstruction of which you are a part that the world has ever seen. More and more history happening faster and faster. Life paths that contained us, that sustained us across millennia, vanishing as we speak, like a species that has become extinct. We are guests at a wake for a way of being that has been ours for hundreds, even thousands of years, and that's why you, friends, are among the most important people in history, whether you like it or not, for what you do with your lives and professions, regardless of your age. How you tell the new story, how you are the new story, can make the difference as to whether we grow or die. So in the traditional male journey, at this point, you generally fight your way through. You get badly wounded, battle and mayhem. In the heroin journey, it is a journey of imagination and creativity and discovering a new story. We know that you can direct the process along lines different from those that the prophets of gloom proclaim as inevitable. You know that the new millennium that we're in is the crossroads between worlds, between species, between ourselves and forever. You know you are its pilgrims and its parents, so no old formulas or stopgap solutions will suit. For a new world to be born, we have to bring a new mind to bear. And that is why Christopher Fry, the great poet, playwright, says, "Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to meet us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul folk ever took." What else does he say? "Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. What are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake?" But will you wake for pity's sake? You are called to take initiatives that just a few years ago would have seemed unlikely, if not downright impossible, but now the world has been rearranged, the reset button of history has been hit, and you no longer have the luxury of sloth and laziness. That's the bad news. But what to do, where to go, how to take initiative? What is key, friends, is how to understand your role in this most compelling moment in human history. You are at the center of the nervous system of present history. You have an opportunity to play a role in the greatest transition drama the world has ever needed, collective speciation. And the time we're in right now may well be the great either-or of history, the great either-or of history. And with this comes the dramatic condition of radical freedom. We are free to make mistakes, encounter suffering, face evil, and generally discover those choices and ways of being that bring us closer to the deep ecology of our universe. We are here to live ethically in the infinitely deep ecology. So in this radical moment in history, we require a radical creativity. We require the incursion of all-knowing that gives us new paradigms. And are these coming from the angels of science? Certainly. From visionary epiphanies which grant us knowledge of the soul? You better believe it. And one view from quantum physics, joined to consciousness study, holds there's always a spectrum of probabilities concerning any event or happening. Now, the problem is that as your mind-brain system is expectant of old ways of inevitable awfulness, with probable outcomes with regard to fortune or misfortune, health or disease, happiness or unhappiness, these expectations are held as what we might call patterns of electrons moving towards certain ends. Make another decision. or allow a shift in consciousness regarding that expectation, hold it with a new intention, with passion and feeling, the electrons bound up with same old probability wave collapse. Now, you'd say a probability wave, that's too... No, you start with a possibility wave. You believe it, you act it, you enact it. We are dramatic by our, as you can see, in our way of being. You enact it, you play it out over and over until it gets stronger and stronger, and the possibility waves cohere and become probability waves. And the universe says, right on, good and faithful servant, we're doing it together. You see, this permits new vectors of energy to emerge, which themselves are guided by the mind's new decision or belief, and a new probability is selected for. Make right now, right this moment, another decision for about your life. Now, another decision about your life. Because as you do this, you wrench yourself from the rust of millennia, from the habits of insular thinking people and ideas. We are trying to make a gigantic leap of faith, going cosmic without rarely ever having been there. But we are prepared for the biggest jump in history. And it has very practical consequences: creative expression, excitement, manifestation, making things happen. You yourself serve as bridge and builder of evolutionary principles into life on this planet. You do so with courage and commitment and with no turning back. And then, my friends, you become a luminous grounding force of manifestation, if you will, of God beingness in time. What are called miracles or extraordinary events become the ordinary things of everyday life. This can take the form of rapid healing, remarkable synchronicities as people, resources, events, timing come to you in rather novelistic ways. It's like you're reading a novel. Patterns fall into place with beauty. And you know that your own life is advancing the life of the world in little and big ways. You become one who lives in such a state of delight and illumination, where things are pulled into resonance and meaning, and the furthest star, in some sense, is right next door. The art and practice of happiness is very important. Joy is very important. Happiness tends to attract what my Sicilian grandmother called abundance, not abundance. Abundance is too little. Abundance. Can you say that in the Italian way? Hey, you use your hands. Hey. Abundance. Anybody else Italian here? The other half of me is Scotch, so just remember I'm sort of tempered. You know. So then come, as I say, the mythic friends. The mythic friends, the archetypes. Great stories. And you begin to see your life as a larger story than had previously been known. When we reframe our life story, or the story of our community or task, as a great story, we enter consciously into the mythic realm, into potent dramas. We find new metaphors for conflict and conciliation, but you have to change the story and realize it as myth. A myth is something that never was, but is, dear friend, always happening. We are mythic beings. Myths sustain and shape our emotional attitudes, provide us with life purpose, and energize our everyday acts. We discover powers within ourselves, once you go mythic, which protect us, and we forge new bonds, purpose, and allies. And we discover that we too are valuable characters in the drama of the world, pushing the boundaries of our own local story and gaining the courage to be, to do so much more. So you discover, my friends, that you are a mything link. In fact, my autobiography is called A Mythic Life. So yes, all kinds of interesting folks show up. gods, goddesses, numinous, borderline persons, legendary figures, ones who arise from your own psyche as guiding archetypes, but also flow into new archetypes that are beginning to arise. Until finally you enter the deepest place of the mythological world, the nadir, into the very depths of the mythic heroic journey itself. In the male version, the first beingness you meet is called atonement with the Father, or rather in our terms, the understanding of the very matrices and patterns that keep reality going. And as you begin to make a deeper connection to yourself as a quantum partner, as a universal mythic being, and not just a local, in a constant state of transformation, you begin to strengthen your capacity of emerging powers, entering into the treasury of unseen generosities, not as in the hero journey, which tends to move to what attracts them, gold, power, killing the demon. In the heroine's journey, it's much more interesting. It has to do with looking at and then creatively applying some of the quantum and spiritual discoveries concerning the nature of reality. It's a different order of qualities and capacities. Whereas the hero tends to value classical forms that are mired in the male universe, strength, trickery, beating up of enemies. In the heroine's world, the qualities valued are very different. Compassion, healing, helping others, but also healing of self and others, restorative justice, instead of throwing people in prison, finding balance and equality. And also different levels of reality. How many of you have ever seen angels? How many have ever seen interesting, different kind of folk? Fairy folk, elves, things. How many of you? I just want to know, because you'd be surprised. It's more the law than the exception. I'm going to ask a question that they don't want me to ask here, but I will. How many of you have ever seen something flying in the sky that seems very interesting, that's now on the first page of the New York Times and the Washington Post? How many have ever seen one? Would you stand up? I just want to look at the percentage. If you've ever seen a saucer or something that's flying, like they have, ooh, look at that. Mm-hmm. More than a quarter of the audience. How many have ever had a close association, have met one of these? Not me, I've never seen one. And I have no association, but I know that they're out there. This universe is vastly populated. You've actually had one. You've had a direct connection. Yeah, I have a good friend who has recently been seeing them. It's quite interesting. She's very kosher, and then all of a sudden show up. But the universe is getting itself together, I think. Or this is the local Las Vegas of this part of the galaxy, where they're up there betting on whether we're going to make it or not. You know, that we can do something else. But anyway, you realize, now one of the things that they speak of is parallel worlds, something I'll talk about, that the quantum physics says that we are ubiquitous through the universe, and there are parallel versions of ourselves. Have you ever felt that? And it isn't just a yearning for something else, it may already exist. I've put people together who have a serious disease with their parallel self that is healthy, and guess what happens? When they really meet and they get immersed in each other's oversoul, if you will, or energetic frequency, and they get well very fast. You know, nobody believes this, but this is what you do. These are implications of quantum physics, you see. So, and inspiration, that helps too. Now, archetypes, you then get great friends. Archetypes. Archetypes are major organs of the psyche. They give us our essential connections. Without them, we would lose the gossamer bridge with nature and mind and body and self with the meta-body of the universe. Archetypes are organs of essence, the cosmic blueprints of how it all works. They bewilder analysis. They can be known only by direct experience. So in the journey of our evolutionary jump time, which is where we are now, we engage archetypal existence. We become the exotype of the archetype, the outplaying in space and time. as the local version of the archetype. I'll tell my own story. Okay. I was not wanted at all. My parents were married in 1936. Here's this Texas cowboy comedian and my extremely, very elegant Sicilian mother. But they're both dancers. That's how they met. They were both, she was a tango dancer, for fun, and he was the person who held on to somebody for 2 weeks dancing. What were they called? The marathons, right. Dad was a marathon. So they met. And he said, "You look like a fairy princess." And she said, "You look like Gary Cooper," which he did, and that's how I got it here. Anyway, but it was the middle of the Depression, and I was born in 1937. And my father was broke. And he said, "Please, Mary, get rid of the kid, get rid of the kid. You can have as many kids you like when I get on the Bob Hope show." Well, she didn't know what to do. And she was at this. And finally, the dream started, and it was the same dream with variations. She's fast asleep, a limo comes, and it carries her to what she describes as the palace. At the palace, there is this lovely tall lady in a long kind of blue Greek thing, who she calls Blue Dell. They dance, they sing, they laugh, and after a while, Blue Dell says, Maria Annunziata is now Mary Houston, Mary, you gotta keep this baby. I know, Blue Dell, but my husband is out. Oh, ignore him, you gotta keep the baby. Ha, 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 and they laugh and sing, and she puts her back in the limo, and my mother wakes up. And my father's good for a day or two, and then he's after, Mary, please, I'm going crazy, I can't afford. Anyway, back, here comes the limo. It takes her to the palace, and there's Blue Dell, and this goes on for weeks and months. And finally, my mother says, Blue Dell, you talk as if this is your baby, it's my baby. And Blue Dell says, well, in a funny way, it's my baby too. No, it isn't, ha, 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 ha. Okay, I get out fast. I get out in my mother's 27th week. I looked awful. And this was in a Brooklyn Catholic hospital. So there they saved the baby, not the mother. My mother did well too. And I'm very small, so you see there's hope. Anyway, I know nothing about this until my father is driving me to Esalen to debate Alan Watts, I remember. And so he's driving me, he says, well, kiddo, you turned out pretty good. I'm glad we decided to keep you. What? Well, your mother never told you. No. And so he tells me this story. And I questioned my mother. She said, yes, but look what a wonderful father he was after you got born, which was true. We were known as the Jack and Jean show. We were always doing wild things. Anyway, did any of you ever meet my father, Jack Houston? What was he like?
He was charming, he was funny, he carried little candies in his pockets to give to the ladies.
That's right, that's him. And he was a real character. He wrote the joke, Who's On First, among other things. This is comedy business. Now, what then happened is, so it's years later, and my mother gives me, I said, Mother, this palace you went to, was it like the Doge Palace we saw in Venice? She says, no, it was nothing like. What was it like? It was more like a Greek temple, really, Mother. And this Blue Dell, was that her name? No, she had another name. It was my pet name for her. What was her name? My mother's in her 90th year. And she says, name some Greek goddesses. I say, well, Artemis, Aphrodite, Hera, Athena. She says, stop, that's who it is. Athena. I wear an Athena that's 2,200 years old. Now, the interesting thing is this particular archetype has been in my life since. I mean, there's the quality of it. I have never seen her. I don't have that ability. Interesting people with interesting capacity to see things see this. And I don't worship Athena. It's not that kind of relationship. But it's as if it's an archetypal pal, an archetypal friend. And with the kinds of things that I've done in the world, helping cultures to develop, well, in spite of globalization, and helping all kinds of socioeconomic, sociopolitical, new ways of being social artistry around the world. I've served as a senior consultant to the United Nations for many, many years. And I've worked in 109 countries at this point, started in 58. Now, but my life is an Athenia type of life. Now, whether it came from me because of my particular interests, or whether it was because I was part of a larger order of belief and relationship, belief is critical to this. This has been my life. I've had a mythic life, which is the title of my autobiography, and have found myself in all kinds of interesting situations, including being shot at twice and having to dive into. It's amazing I'm alive, but here I am, but I've had a very mythic life. So you have been the advisor to 2 US presidents, 3 first ladies, including Eleanor Roosevelt, when I was 16. I wasn't her advisor, but we were good friends. She said to me, "My dear, I rather suspect you're going to have a most interesting career. But remember, my dear, that as a woman in profession, you can expect to be trash." She didn't use the word trash, it may have been trounced. But remember too, my dear, a woman is just like a tea bag. You put her in hot water and she just gets stronger. Which is true. She was a wonderful lady. I knew her when she was in her late 60s, and she was very beautiful at that time. But I've had, I've ended up on the front page of every newspaper, magazine in the world for something that never happened. It was that I was Hillary Clinton's guru, which was not true, but I did help her write a book called It Takes a Village to Raise a Child, and I've spent a lot of time in the White House. But anyway, I've led a mythic life, but it's within the structure of an Athena form. Now, it is never too late to find an archetypal friend who is, let's say that you have the implicate order where everything is coded, seeded, nourished, and then the explicate where the different forms and formulas and energies come into time. In between is a subtle order, which we call the imaginal realm, but also it is the realm of which is a transitional realm because it's not Earth and it is both Earth and universe in a very concrete way. I wrote a book about this called The Search for the Beloved, because often it comes as the archetype of the beloved. How many of you know that? Have any of you read that book? It's really a pretty good book. That and my book on dogs is really good. Mystical dogs. Anyway, I'm half dog, as you can see by the way I do my hair, collie, And anyway, but archetypes, organs of essence, when you have an archetypal pal, whether it's within the Christian or the Catholic form or not, is not the issue. It gives you credence and reality in a larger universe. It's an amplified form of reality. It is an evolutionary evocateur. How many of you have an archetype? What's yours? Ocean, really? Mm-hmm. Give me some more. Who? Artemis, yes.
Spiritus Mercurius.
Who?
Spiritus Mercurius.
Yes, Mercurius, yes.
Allegra. Allegra.
Allegra?
I have one that I call the Queen.
The Queen, yes. And sometimes, with Jung, it was Philemon, the beloved one, and to whom he was in interaction with a great deal of the time. But you can choose an archetype for a while, and you enter into the reality as a great friend. Look in Christianity, it's all those saints, especially Catholicism. It's a great big potpourri of archetypes. And you think of the Christian songs about Jesus. Oh, he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own companion on the road, companion on the on the road of the deep psyche, which is probably one of the reasons why he got to be so popular, is it was taking the ancient archetypal understanding and applying it to somebody who had actually lived, you see. Now, so in a lot of my work we do, and especially the work that Steve does, Steve Eisenstadt and Maren, They both do this kind of thing of how do you get in touch with archetypal agencies and bring them into time to help and do the work of the gods with small g, to do the work of the enhancement of the human condition at a time where it is deeply, deeply. Because friends, we have become directors of a world that up to now has mostly directed us. And this exponential growth in responsibility requires a corresponding enhancement of consciousness and psyche. And this is where the friendship, the partnership with archetypes is so important. So you are the universe in miniature, but in full operation. What is trying to manifest as an evolving species is that within ourselves that is attempting to unfold in your life. That is the universe in miniature. That is why you are central to the new story, to the new myth, to the new pattern of relationships. With each other, I see you as goddess in hiding, as well as the archetypal relationship. You are growing the gods. So, let me recommend a magnificent, well, it's not a book, it's a series of lectures on whatever it is these days, discs, etc., by a very interesting man who's largely Native American, it turns out, Brian Swim. And he wrote this extraordinary book on the powers of the universe. And he implies, he doesn't take it further, he and I are in conversation about this, the way these powers of the universe are the same powers in ourselves. Centration, emergence, transition, radiance. The same powers of the universe that keep the universe going are the same powers in ourselves, for we are fractals of the universe. Now, please know that also we inhabit a universe made real in part by our own observations. We are the shapers and creators living in a participatory universe, or as Padmasambhava said, as viewed, so appears. So then to shape and art your life and your thought, that you are shaping and patterning this universe. And the universe is built like an enormous feedback loop in which we contribute to the ongoing creation of not just the present and the future, but the past as well. In the Buddhist world, it is called interdependent co-arising. Interdependent co-arising. In the Christian language, we find like Meister Eckhart saying, the eye by which I see God is the same eye by which God sees me. He got into a lot of trouble with the Pope with that one. So you can influence by way of their method and the madness of your own observation. You influence particles and waves about the way they're going to behave, but also the way they behave in the past, as we found that we shift the past by our observation. And we then participate in the whole blooming universe as a work in progress. We are tiny patches of a universe looking at itself, building itself. It's not only the future that is determined, but the present and possibly the past. Now, you do this joyously. Joyousness seems to attract the universal patterns that you require. It isn't, oh, I wish, please, please, no. And you can even be demonic and dynamic about it. My Sicilian grandmother. I was 5 years old. I had arrived from Hollywood because my father had been just kicked off the Hope Show. And we were living with my mother's parents in Brooklyn. And my grandmother, who spoke no English particularly, said, Gina, I take you to this church. I shows you how we work with the Sante. Oh, thank you, Nana. So she takes me, my Nana. And she says, she goes to the statue of St. Anthony. She lights a little candle. Sant'Antonio, mio figlio Salvatore, è molto malato. My son, Salvatore, is very sick. You fix, I'll make you big candle. You watch, Gina, this will work. Come back the next day, he's much sicker. Hey, Tony, he's not doing no good. You got to fix, eh? Okay. Next day, he's worse. He actually lived a long life, but he was sick at that time. She comes back, he's been worse. She goes to the candle and she goes, she blows it out. And then she goes to another saying, Santa Caterina, mio figlio Salvador. And I got a strange notion of the way of working with the saints, but it has held over. But the issue, friends, is that we have an enormous ecology of help. That is the glory of it. It's the glorious. Observation is internal, but it is also, friends, it is also external. And that's why some people have amazing good luck, because the nature of their consciousness is to hold to the creative possibilities so radically that they have absolutely no doubt but that it will absolutely manifest in a certain way. Dear old Joe Campbell was like this in many ways. He said, follow your bliss, and he really did. I'd walk along with him, and he was so happy, and he was really quite, he was a happy man. He had a very happy marriage. And she's still alive at 103. She's 103, and she's still alive. So if a person is thinking in terms of certain energies, he or she is creating bonded electrons with the appropriate energy that is then activates, come to being as an enormously creative and potent intention. Now, this brings us to the nadir of the heroine's journey. In the depth of it, it's called the hieros gamos, the holy marriage between the male and the female. And in the female journey, it's the search for the beloved. In my book, The Search for the Beloved, I wrote about the deep quest of yearning, the deep quest of yearning for the beloved of the soul. And it is the feeling of the presencing. And one of the best of the archetypes of the beloved is the great, well, take it in itself. It is the beloved of the soul. It's the beloved of the soul who partners with you in some mysterious way. It is a quantum partner because it serves to engage you to your higher task, but it keeps you in an emotional fluidity with the deepest life that is calling you. It provides you with a wave tide of giving and receiving so very abundant that it seems drawn from the very ocean of abundance itself. The living together with it of life's dramas, tragedies, comedies, theater of the absurd, mystery plays, and the great myths. You go mythic when you are with the great archetype of your own unique beloved of the soul. Who or what is it that is yearning for you to enter into partnership, calling to you the presence of the great friend you're always, always trying to remember? And the remembrance, the discovery and development of this union is key to this transformational work. For it enables the emergent creative forms of the depth world, the world of the archetypal friends, to enter with you, and by extension through you, enter into time and space. And thus, the critical importance of the yearning for the great communion that completes our reality and causes the patterns of essential and existential realms to connect. Who is the most popular poet of modern time? Now, Rumi, who was born, 900 years before, because of the search for the beloved, which may be the key and most important pursuit that we can be taken in this time. So we are moving, I believe, at the best, into what will become a planetary culture as we see a convergence, not a culture, planetary civilization with high individuation of culture, with the convergence of the whole palette of human culture, beliefs, ways of being. We find all over the world the attempt to try and coalesce into a new and higher unity for which we are seemingly unprepared. So this yearning for partnership can help us to re-educate ourselves for sacred stewardship so that we have the resources to make a difference. And that's why the co-creative partnership with the beloved archetype becomes an active creative force in everyday existential world. Indeed, as I said, my studies of highly creative and productive people confirm a strong relationship to the archetypal partner enhances and sustains their work in the world. I believe, friends, that we are becoming equal to the requirements of our time. And especially with partnership, whether it is with your friends around you, having, as Margaret Mead suggested, to start growing, teaching, learning communities, where you grow, where you do exercises, processes, not necessarily psychotherapy, because it's not about that. It's about mutual growth and evolution. That I think this nurtures the innate seed of our own divinity. And that's why at the end of the hero's journey comes the boons. It's where you get the great boons, the ultimate boon for your own and others' transformation. And that is the mystic path, ultimately. And it is in the feminine journey the mastery of the game of paradox, finding ways of uniting your finite and your infinite self. Entering a deep maturation process that brings your potentials into the world so you can accomplish your spiritual, your physical, your everyday purposes and profoundly contribute to the evolution of our planetary civilization because you have so many jobs that do not vanish. And so you come home, but you're filled with the paradox. The paradox, we are both infinite and finite beings. As finite beings, we are God's stuff incorporated in space and time. As infinite beings, we are the living universe in an eternal yet spirited form of itself. And this infinite self that you really have to believe in and live in is an eternal, expressive aspect of what you may have called God. And we find ourselves capable of creating this new self, this godding self. That is you, the human being, the microcosm or the fractal of the infinite self. So you return, moving beyond a lifetime of programmed deprivation, negative creativity, and into the role for which our minds and bodies have been patterned, the earth arena, in which we can explore, test, and manifest our positive creative skills, and the larger agenda, which is world making. World making. World making. So I close with lines of another old friend of mine, who I used to walk with between my 14th and 17th year in Central Park, who I called Mr. Teilhard, who turned out to be Teilhard de Chardin, who lived across the street from me. And he's the one who said, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Thank you.